One day, a friend of mine contacted me for a consultation. I was studying cognitive psychology at the time. At that moment, he was the head of the administration of a central district in a city with excellent chances of becoming mayor. But before we got down to work, we started talking about life. He told me how much he adored his wife and child, how much joy he got from teaching, how he wanted to write a book. And of course, he dreamed of one day babysitting his grandchildren, which is why he had decided to do more sports, to swim, to lead a healthy lifestyle in general. The next morning, we met again, and I could see his mindset had already changed. Now it was, how do I become the new mayor? So I reminded him of what he had said the day before, about his dreams and desires, about how much happiness energy I had felt in all of that. Yes, he could absolutely become mayor. He had more chances than the other candidates, but I told him that, in that case, he would have to postpone, if not entirely forget, everything else that was truly essential to him. Your resources are here, in your family. All your energy is here. Right now, for the sake of your career, you're essentially giving this up. And the unconscious does not forgive that kind of refusal of your true desires. For about 6 months, you'll manage on the energy of novelty, new people, new processes, a new position, a new office, a new scale. But after 6 months, you'll start noticing that you're getting sick more often. Another 6 months later, you'll suddenly realize you're stumbling more on flat ground. Sprains and fractures will start piling up. Then your heart will begin to act up. And if you still don't understand the signals your unconscious is sending you, it may take extreme measures and simply switch you off. Freedom means responsibility. That's why most people are afraid of it. Bernard Shaw. That's how a human being is built. If their unconscious realizes they are not moving toward their own goal, first it tries to stop them, and then it may try to switch them off altogether. From the unconscious mind's point of view, there is simply no movement in the right direction. Even when a person achieves some result, they feel unhappy if that result does not lead toward their own goal. And the unconscious does not forgive that. That's why the ability to want what you truly want is the ability to understand what you need, not what others need from you. To find your own personal zone of happiness, to hear your inner signals. This applies to everything: your choice of food, the road you take, your life partner, your profession. Even sex fulfills its emotional and psychological functions only if it is completely sincere, and only if, in a relationship with this partner, a person can actually live out everything they dream of. The problem of how our desires relate to our real possibilities is one of the most important in any human community. On an everyday, ordinary level, this clash has been captured in countless sayings that, in their concreteness, are often surprisingly deep. From the joke, "I want to buy a car, but don't have the means. I can afford a goat, but I don't want one," to the famous toast from the heart of Caucasus. So let us drink to this, that our desires may always match our possibilities. Everyone wants freedom, but that only seems so from the outside. In reality, deep down, no one wants freedom. Freedom is like mountain air. For the weak, it is unbearable. Ryonosuke Akutagawa. Yet the ability to relate our own desires to the desires of others, to define and outline the circle of what is permitted, goes far beyond banalities and jokes. From the very dawn of civilization, this ability became one of the core moral practices in all the great religious and ethical teachings of the world. From attempts to rein in our restless and truly boundless desires, in which the bodily, carnal side of the human being perhaps shows itself most fully, asceticism is born, the monastic feat in its many forms. From these same attempts grows a philosophical reflection on the relationship between freedom and desire. What is freedom? For Sigmund Freud, freedom is the ability to want what you really want. To gain freedom is to learn to feel and understand your true desires. Let's look at an interesting experiment. A group of people were asked to copy a telephone directory for 20 minutes. Half of the group were invited to do this with the remark that they were free to refuse the task if they did not want to do it. The other half were simply told they had to complete the task, with no alternative offered. After the task, the participants were asked to rate what they had just done. Those who had been given a choice and still decided to take part rated the activity 9 out of a possible 11 points. This shows that a person feels genuine satisfaction when they choose for themselves. The second half rated the very same task only 2 out of 11. From this, we can conclude that restricting freedom of choice makes almost any task unpleasant and robs a person of the feeling of enjoyment. To be free means, without coercion, to be open to alternatives, not constrained by a single or fixed direction. Whether in the course of events or in the flow of time, wrote the American psychologist Joseph Richlack in his book, The Study of the Freedom of Desire and Responsibility. A person feels free when they can freely change their plan of action, reconsider their attitude toward reality, and adopt new ways of evaluating things. People who exercise the freedom of desire are confident, responsible individuals who clearly describe their problems and consciously take the right steps towards solving them. Such people can manage their emotions and are capable of understanding others. Freedom is the nurse of all great talents. Like an inspiration from above, it has cleansed and enlightened our souls. It has struck the shackles from our minds, widened them, and raised them high above themselves. Give me, therefore, the freedom to know, the freedom to express my thoughts, and, above all, the freedom to judge according to my conscience. John Milton. As the proverb says, no matter what gate you lock the horse behind, it will still strain to break free. A person who lives out the freedom of desire follows a simple chain. Desire, goals, responsibility. For a free person, this chain is flexible. It is constantly changing and never static. Once someone is freed from rigid thinking patterns, new perspectives open up before them. Ready-made templates no longer press down on them. They become better at recognizing different ways of reaching their goals, and their knowledge of society and of themselves expands. They begin to understand themselves more deeply, to define their desires and inner resources, and to plan more effectively. According to Richlack, if a person can become aware of the reasons behind their actions, accept responsibility, and is able to evaluate and change the target programs of the present and the future, then they are free not only in their desires, but also in their actions. Desires arise very often, but most of them disappear after a brief reflection. Our logic finds facts that point to the unreality or uselessness of a particular desire. Interestingly, in children, this process of reflection is almost absent. That is why, after 3 portions of ice cream, a child may suddenly want cake as well. But once they get it, they eat a small piece and realize they do not want any more. Adults are more critical toward their wants and desires. I can't. I don't need it. What will my friends think? It's too soon for me. These are the kinds of objections that show up. And in the end, it turns out that a person seems to want many things in life, yet cannot clearly express their real desires. Freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes. Mahatma Gandhi. Every human action, what physiologists call conditioned reflex activity, right down to its smallest details, is always dictated by a person's needs. The unique configuration of needs in each individual is based, first of all, on the genetic, hereditary structure of those needs and predispositions. Driven by many needs at once, at any given moment a person is occupied with the one that is most pressing. From the standpoint of physiology, this is called a dominant. According to the eminent German physiologist Carl Jung, among the reflex acts that can be carried out at a given moment, there are some whose realization is of the greatest interest to the organism. In other words, they are the most important right now. These reflexes are carried out, while the others, less important ones, are inhibited. Jung called the centers involved in carrying out dominant reflexes the dominant focus of excitation. This focus is stable. It is difficult to suppress, and the intensity of its excitation inhibits other potential dominant foci. For example, finishing our work may be extremely important to us, but if we haven't eaten all day, that dominant need will make itself felt more and more strongly because hunger carries a greater potential threat to the organism than postponed work. All dominants are either situational, triggered by an acute need, practical, which require a certain amount of time, longer or shorter, or primary, vital ones, the most stable of all those inherent in a given person. The fulfillment of one's deep, vital needs is always accompanied by positive emotions. The feeling of happiness that arises when our needs are realized is an indicator that we are moving along the right path. And when we are forced to deal not with our own personal dominant, but with tasks that are essentially unimportant to us, things turn out the way Napoleon once described it. Many of the misfortunes on earth occur because people are not doing their own work. A great tailor languishes in a talentless man of science, and a brilliant barber suffers in a ministerial chair. Freedom is a luxury not everyone can afford. Otto von Bismarck. On the philosophical level, the problem of the relationship between desires and possibilities was already recognized by the pre-Socratics. It is hard to fight against the heart. Every desire is bought at the price of the soul, noted Heraclitus. And he added, it would not be better for people if everything they wished for came true. Socrates, for his part, directly stated the overarching task that stands before a human being, formulating the famous thesis, know thyself, nosce te ipsum. Understanding this as the requirement to become aware of one's true desires in order to attain genuine freedom and moral perfection. If this content resonates with you, hit subscribe button. Thank you for your support. Through the Stoics and other philosophical currents of Hellenistic Roman antiquity, these ideas of Socrates would be taken up by later ages as well. Blessed Augustine, reflecting on the problem of the will as desire, observes, it is enough simply to want to walk, and then you are not only already walking, you are already at your destination, but you must want it strongly, with all your heart, and not rush back and forth with your half-sick will, in which one desire struggles with another, and now one wins, now the other. Caught up in trends and stereotypes about what one is supposed to want, a person cannot always make out their true desires. Modern consumer society is increasingly built on mechanisms of actively manufacturing demand. According to the theory of the renowned economist John Maynard Keynes, the founder of Keynesian macroeconomic theory, the state not only can stimulate demand among its citizens through special measures, it is obliged to do so in order to prevent, or at least soften, economic crises that inevitably arise from time to time in any country. In Keynes's view, the main engine of the economy is demand, which must be shaped by every possible means, from intrusive advertising to the construction of an ideology of mass consumption. What in some cases is called freedom, in others is called license. Marcus Fabius Quintilian. The postmodernists Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari argued that modern human beings have not only their needs, but their very desires imposed on them by an economy equipped with advertising, with brands promoted as a way of life, and so on. They even proposed the term machine for the production of desires to underline the supra-personal, automated character of this imposition. Is it possible, under these conditions, to gain freedom, to become conscious of one's own desires rather than the planted ones that have quietly come to feel as if they were yours? It is difficult. It demands serious reflection and, above all, creative effort. To refuse ready-made solutions and instead to create your own. This is the reliable path to slowly freeing yourself from the nets of imposed needs and desires. And yet, As Roland Barthes, one of the classics of French structuralist philosophy of the second half of the 20th century, insisted, there is no other way to become original than first to master to perfection the existing patterns of behavior. In the religious dimension, freedom is understood as an element of the divine essence that has been granted to human beings. In Islam, human freedom can be considered from different angles, and the most important of these is the question of religious freedom. In the Quran, a person is given the right to choose for themselves the religion whose truth they believe in. There is no compulsion in religion. This implies that God has prepared a unique path for each person. Yet together with this freedom of choice comes full responsibility for one's actions. No soul shall bear the burden of another. Free is the one who can choose not to lie. Albert Camus. A famous saint of the still undivided church, Blessed Augustine, Augustinus Sanctus, 354 to 430, who laid the foundations of Christian culture, wrote about different levels of spiritual perfection that govern our desires. Great is the freedom to be able not to sin, but the greatest freedom is to be unable to sin. And the will within us is always free, though not always good. The Talmud says, everything is in the hands of heaven, except the fear of heaven. The sages saw in this a conflict that arises in our consciousness between the idea of the Creator's omnipotence and the central principle of human freedom of choice. At first glance, their answer seems to narrow human freedom down to the inner world alone. But that is only a superficial impression. Awe before God is indeed a part of a person's inner world, yet through it, the gates to the wider world are opened. The Creator of the world, the only true possessor of freedom in this world, has shared this freedom with human beings. According to some Talmudic commentators, this is precisely what is meant when we say that the human being is created in the image of the Most High. Human freedom flows from the fact that we have been given the commandments, and thus must freely choose between good and evil. Buddhism does not divide our desires into bad and good. Instead, it warns us against losing awareness and control over what we long for. When we are hungry, thirsty, or freezing, our desires for food, water, and warmth are natural and wholesome. Our longing for friendship, community, beauty, creative power, and a productive outlet for our energy is also positive. To eradicate all desire would be to condemn ourselves to a life of stagnation. What matters is recognizing the fine line between healthy desire and neurotic dependency. For example, when we overeat, we are not eating because the body truly needs more nourishment. We may be seeking greater comfort in food because we lack love or because our self-esteem is low. But food cannot give us either of those things. In fact, overeating only makes it harder for us to receive what we really need. Seeing this clearly is the beginning of freedom from that dependence, and this is the first step on the path of spiritual growth. Freedom never comes from the government. Freedom always comes from its subjects. The history of liberty is the history of the limitation of governmental power, not the increase of it. Thomas Woodrow Wilson. The complete freedom of heart and mind, at the highest level possible, is the aim and object of Buddhist life and practice. The Buddha once said, "Just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so my teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom." This is the ultimate goal, the culmination of Buddhism, if you like. The taste of complete spiritual freedom. Freedom from our attachments, from our addictions, as the Mahayana tradition often says. Isaiah Berlin once wryly remarked, "The freedom of an Oxford professor is not the same thing as the freedom of an Egyptian peasant." A person is free in their choices and in their desires only within the limits set for them by society through its laws and moral codes. Yet it is precisely with these social stereotypes that we drown out the unconscious signals coming from the self, from our own path. To deceive ourselves is a grotesque absurdity. Why should we trust stereotypes? There are countless ones, and for the most part they contradict one another. At some point we realize that we have been dreaming the wrong dream, not our own. But if we begin to listen to our unconscious, many things will begin to arrange themselves almost on their own, forming a clear road toward our true desires. To be aware of responsibility is to be aware of creating by oneself, one's own self, one's destiny, one's life troubles, one's feelings, and also one's suffering. Irvin Yalom. If this exploration of desire, freedom, and responsibility resonates with you, please consider subscribing. It helps us keep making thoughtful, in-depth videos like this one. In the end, Buddhism, philosophers, and modern psychology are all pointing to the same uncomfortable truth. No one else will come and free us. Freedom begins where we stop lying to ourselves, stop living by stereotypes, and start listening to the quiet signals of our own unconscious. You can keep chasing imposed desires, or you can slowly, stubbornly build a life around what you truly want, with all the responsibility that comes with it. Thank you for watching and for taking this time to reflect on your own path.